I was asked to review his latest book, The Romantic Generation. Have you gotten your hands on it?
No, I haven't. I read a review of it. And he told me that he was going to do that.
Yeah, but he talks about the understanding that in Liszt, the terrific sonorities that Liszt was coming up with throughout his career were often referential to other instruments or sounds. Whereas with Chopin, they were distinctly pianistic sonorities. They were also very variegated sonorities, but sort of pianistic sonorities.
Peculiar. Yeah, I think you may be right.
I hadn't thought of it, but often.
Well,
with Liszt, it's not always. He didn't mean always another musical instrument, but the clumping of horses, hoofs, and Mazeppa, I think you mentioned.
Yes, and of course things like the musical things like the cymbalon in the Hungarian Rhapsodies.
Yeah,
or the violin and Mephisto waltz, and that's
Yeah.
true, and the extra musical storylines, which Chopin rarely did. He's called something a ballade, but you don't really know whether he's basing it on a poetic ballad or whether he's just calling it a ballade.
Because he needed a title.
Yeah, I agree. And the Chopin, the only thing you can really point to in Chopin is the bel canto, the Bellini, which she certainly was very interested in the earlier works. So you hear these, like the nocturne. It's definitely has the quality of a vocal line in length and the breathing.
Yeah, an
Italianate, yeah.
Bel canto. Yeah, I've heard you twice now in recital, and I've read about you, and I've thought at times, well, he's a Beethoven pianist, and then, oh no, wait a minute now. There's all this Rachmaninoff. Oh, and then there's quite an interest in American contemporary, not just contemporary American music, but American music and English contemporary music. So actually, you probably don't wish to be pigeonholed in one area. Sounds like you wouldn't be interested because they all, in a way, can help you.
Yes.
Self-referential somehow.
Yeah. I find it that interesting. I find the variety of things very interesting. But of course, one doesn't want to spread oneself too thin. The Rachmaninoff I've done for a long time. I mean, I learned those pieces because I was fascinated by the sounds and the difficulty of them. Before that, the transcriptions, some of the transcriptions, and some of the preludes. And I think I did the transcriptions, all of them, in 73. Yeah, that was his 100th year, Rachmaninoff's 100th year, when they came out with that book, the Centennial Collection. And so I got my hands on all the transcriptions, and I did a recital of all of them. And then I recorded them. I just recorded them on CD now. All of those plus the other arrangements, and including the Star Spangled Banner and some of these other things.
By Rachmaninoff?
Yeah. Oh. It's now come out. Rachmaninoff's own version was never recorded except on piano roll, and I got it from the piano roll from a place in California. They sent me a cassette copy of the piano roll, and I transcribed it. And
by ear?
Yeah. Which I had already done with the Rosenthal piece, Carnaval de Vienne. That was the biggest challenge.
Oh, there's no written copy of it?
There is, but in England, in Europe, I couldn't get hold of one. I got it when I came to this country, but it was. You need to probably have. Do you have any of the CDs?
They sent me the first of the two Brahms variations.
Well, there are two CDs in there.
But I only got.
It's small. But no, Hobson's Choice.
Now that one I was particularly interested in.
Hobson's Choice has this Rosenthal, and I talk about how that story in the program notes. And the Rachmaninoff complete arrangements and transcriptions, which has just come out, will tell you the Star Spangled Banner story in the notes too. So
I thought maybe if there were a record store near here I could find.
There is. They got everything. Yeah, I can show you that. I'll take you there.
Was there something about the Rachmaninoff that drew you especially?
Yeah, I heard years ago, I think my first record was of a 78, which my parents had, of Mozevich playing on one side the C-sharp minor prelude of Rachmaninoff, and the other side the G minor. And I wanted to play the C-sharp minor because everybody wanted to play the C-sharp minor, and so I learned it when I was a kid. I had it. Before I was 10, I was playing this piece. But on the other side was this G minor, which is so difficult, but so wonderful sounding, and I always remember that record, because Mozevich was one of Rachmaninoff's favorite pianists. And he had this very special sound, very strong rhythmic sense. Never overplayed anything. It was always very elegant and discreet. So then I didn't know that he'd written any more preludes at that point. I just knew that, and so I studied those.
Oral sound.
But at the same time, I was doing what all good students should do as kids, beginning to study Haydn sonatas and some Beethoven. And Beethoven, I also came to in my later teens and started with the later sonatas. I did 101, I remember. I did the Waldstein too, and the Pathétique, of course. Everybody does the Pathétique when they're very young, and there's one of those pieces that, why keep people away from Opus 109 when they're 18, and give them the Pathétique when they're 13? That's what everybody does.
That's what happened to me.
Everybody gets that, and why? Pathétique is one of the most complex pieces if you don't see it in the context of what was he doing. This is not a normal sonata, This is a great big introduction, which is very rhythmically complicated, and the slow movement, the singing slow movement. It's really a not particularly brilliant last movement. It's not immediately effective.
Kind of somber.
Yeah. I always find that very curious.
Slow movement in my own mind, but I thought it's got elements of the later Beethoven in it.
Oh, yes.
He just, do you think he bears his soul pure with a kind of pure structure?
Yeah.
Do you ask students to bring things back after, do you have time in the lessons to kind of keep track of their repertoire and help them bring things back after their recitals or after they perform it? Or
usually we talk about it. I don't usually have them play things unless there's a purpose. After they've given a recital, they may say, well, I'm going to use this for a competition, I'm going to review that piece, so we review it. So there are occasions, of course, we review pieces over and over again, which is fine. But I like to hear things frequently. I think it's not a good idea just to give one lesson on a piece and then say, well, now you've got my thoughts on that piece, let's move on to play me something else next week. I'd like to have them come in cycles. It's nice to hear how they've responded and what they've discovered for themselves.
Yes.
And it's good to encourage a dialogue, because they can learn a lot that way by having to answer questions about things. Ask themselves questions. I had a student the other day who was playing a Bach prelude. I think there wasn't a wrong note anywhere. So just sit down at the piano, and yet nothing came through. And so instead of saying, well, play this a little slower here, and why don't you try leaning on this note a bit and expressing this a bit more? You could do that approach.
Sort of particular.
Yeah. I decided to say, okay, what is this piece about? What is it? And of course that brings an immediate silence from anybody. But I said, well, let's just look. Don't try and think up any fancy answers. Let's just see. What is it? Well, it's a prelude. Good. Happy, sad. What key is it? Major key, minor key. 3/8 time. Okay. Texture. What kind of texture is it? Well, it's in two voices. And what do the two voices do? They start out like this, and then they reverse. That's good, so that goes so. And then, what about the rhythm? Well, the rhythm is very regular until particular place, in which there's always a syncopation. There's always there's a tie over the va line. Okay, and then on and on and on, and what happens here, and then the second page is different. What's this like? So it's alternating hands. Well, does that remind you of something else? Well, it's like a toccata. Fine, okay. And what about this passage at the end, which is just single notes rippling up and down the piano? Well, it's like a cadenza. So we established some of these things. And that the fact that it was dance-like, it wasn't a song, it was a dance. And so without really making any interpretative decisions, just by saying, well, this is what's here on paper, what do you make of that? Then play it. And then it was completely different.
So fairly objective observations about the
And I took that line with that particular student on that particular day because I felt that that's what this person needed. It wasn't that they couldn't play it. It was they played it fine, but it was completely meaningless. So I think that for myself, I always feel that that's, well, what is this piece? You know, what am I trying to do?
Do so-called mental practice, or I suppose one thinks about music uncontrollably or unstoppably away from the keyboard, and do you sort of encourage that expressly with your students?
Yeah, sometimes. They say, especially if they're having memory problems, I say, can you lie down, close your eyes, and think this piece? Can you imagine yourself playing? Can you, even if you go like this, you know, can you visualize or oralize this? And they say, well, yes, I can, but except here I cannot. Say, well, then do it little by little. Play it on the keyboard, and then sit and imagine yourself playing. Because it's the combination of things. Memorization is partly by feel, tactile. It's partly by ear. It's partly by visualizing the score. It's a whole combination of things, I think. I don't have I'm sure there are people who have photographic memories. I don't have photographic memories. I don't just look at something and that's it, you know. But nevertheless, even those of us who don't have photographic memories, they still, the score, the layout, it has a lot to do with
integration of
memory and how it sounds and how it looks. And so another way of putting it is landmarks. I would say have landmarks for yourself so that you know where you're going and you know where the next one is.
Do you have any thoughts on how much time to practice?
Yeah, I think that you really need to practice 3 to 4 hours. Somebody in a college level who really wants to be serious about this must do that much time. I think it's counterproductive to do 9 or 10 hours because you cannot concentrate. And if you really concentrate for 3 hours, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't recommend doing it all at once unless you have to. So it's really, as another of my teachers said, practicing is, you should practice so that you don't have to anymore.
Yeah.
You know, practicing is not necessarily an end in itself. That's different for